You're standing on a bridge in the middle of Chicago. Below you, the river slides past, slow and green, catching the light between the towers. It looks like every other river you've ever seen. It isn't, because this water is moving the wrong way. Every river on Earth follows one simple law. Water runs downhill, and downhill always ends at the sea. A river has one direction, and it keeps it for as long as the river exists. That's the rule. And the water under your feet, in the middle of Chicago, is breaking it, flowing away from the lake it's supposed to empty into, because a little over 100 years ago, this city reached down and turned its river around. So here's the question this whole video is really about. How do you make a river run backwards? And the stranger question underneath it, can it happen without us? Start with Chicago, because Chicago did it on purpose, and the reason is grim. In the 1800s, the Chicago River flowed the natural way, east into Lake Michigan, which would be fine except for one detail. Lake Michigan was where the city got its drinking water, and the river was where the city put everything else. The slaughterhouses, the factories, the sewage of more than 1 million people. All of it went into the river, and the river carried all of it straight into the lake, the same lake the pipes drank from. So the city was, very slowly, poisoning itself. Every glass of water was a gamble. Outbreaks of cholera and typhoid rolled through the streets, and the thing spreading them wasn't some mystery. It was the river. The river was carrying the city's waste back to its own mouth. They tried patching it. They pushed the water intake cribs farther out into the lake, 2 miles offshore. The filth followed. There was no fix that involved leaving the river alone. So the engineers looked at the problem and decided on something that sounds insane when you say it out loud. If the river keeps pouring poison into our drinking water, we will make the river flow the other way. Here's the trick. A river doesn't choose its direction. Gravity chooses for it. Water goes to the lowest place it can reach. So if you want the river to reverse, you don't push the water. You change the shape of the land and let the water fall the new way on its own. Between the Chicago River and the Mississippi Valley to the south, there's a low ridge, a divide. On one side, water drains toward the Great Lakes and the Atlantic. On the other, it drains toward the Mississippi and the Gulf. Chicago sat right on the wrong side of that line. So the engineers dug through it. They carved an enormous channel called the Sanitary Ship Canal, 28 miles long, cut deep enough that the far end sat lower than the lake. It was one of the largest earth-moving projects the continent had ever seen. The crews invented new machines just to shift the dirt, techniques they'd later carry south to help dig the Panama Canal. And on the 2nd day of January, 1900, they opened it. The river paused, as if deciding. And then the whole thing began to flow the other way. Backwards, away from Lake Michigan, downhill toward the Mississippi. A major river reversed by human hands, and it has never turned back. It still runs the wrong way today. But here's the part they don't put on the plaque. Chicago didn't destroy its waste, it just aimed it at someone else. All that sewage now flowed downstream, toward the towns of the Illinois River, and eventually toward St. Louis, sitting on the Mississippi. St. Louis was furious. The state of Missouri took the state of Illinois all the way to the Supreme Court to try to stop the river of filth heading its way. That's the quiet truth about reversing a river. You don't make the problem disappear. You just decide who has to live with it. So that's what it takes for people to flip a river. A divide cut open, decades of digging, and a lawsuit between 2 states. Now hold that in your mind. The sheer size of the human effort it took. Because nature can do the very same thing in a single afternoon. On a cold night in the winter of 1811, in the town of New Madrid on the Mississippi, people woke to the ground moving like water. It was the first of the New Madrid earthquakes, some of the most powerful ever recorded in the eastern United States. Riverboat crews who lived through it reported something no one believed at first. For a few hours, the Mississippi River ran backwards. The quake had heaved the land upward in some places and dropped it in others. And for a short, impossible window, the water actually climbed upstream, pouring into the low ground the earthquake had just made. When it settled, there was a brand new lake sitting in the sunken land. Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee, which you can still visit today. A lake that exists because, for one night, a river forgot which way was downhill. No canal, no engineers, just the ground itself, tilting, and a river obediently following the new low point. Exactly what Chicago's engineers would spend years forcing their river to do. Only nature did it in an afternoon and asked no one's permission. Which brings us to the largest river on the planet, and the strangest reversal of them all. The Amazon carries more water than the next several biggest rivers on Earth combined. Today, it flows from west to east, from the Andes Mountains near the Pacific all the way across the continent to the Atlantic. That crossing feels permanent, eternal. It is not, because in the early ages of the Earth, before the Andes existed, the Amazon flowed the other way. It drained toward the west, toward the Pacific. The whole continent leaned in the opposite direction, and the greatest river system in the world ran backwards compared to how it runs now. And then the ground moved. Along the western edge of the continent, two vast plates of the Earth's crust began to collide, and where they met, they pushed up a wall of rock, the Andes. Slowly, that wall climbed higher, right across the river's path, and it did to the Amazon exactly what the low ridge did to Chicago. It stood in the water's way and blocked the exit. The river had nowhere to go. Its western door was closing, inch by inch, as the mountains rose. So the water backed up behind the growing Andes and pooled into something almost impossible to picture. A vast inland world of swamps and lakes spread across the middle of the continent, going nowhere at all, until it found a new way out. The trapped water slowly worked its way east, wearing a path toward the Atlantic on the far side of the continent. And once that door opened, the whole system tipped and drained the other way. The greatest river on Earth had been turned completely around. Not by a canal, not by an earthquake, by a mountain range rising so slowly that no one could ever have watched it happen. And it stayed reversed. Every drop of water in the Amazon today is running the opposite direction from the way it began, because the land underneath it changed its mind. So think back to that bridge in Chicago and the water sliding the wrong way beneath your feet. It took the whole city to force that one river to turn around. A divide cut open, the largest dig on the continent, a fight all the way to the Supreme Court. An earthquake did the same to the Mississippi in a single night. A mountain range did it to the Amazon without a single person alive to see. Every river runs to the sea, until something big enough decides the sea should be somewhere else. Because downhill was never really a fixed direction. It's just wherever the ground happens to be lowest right now. And the ground is always, quietly, on the move. There's one part of the Chicago story I still can't settle. They saved a city by reversing a river and handed their sewage to everyone downstream. Was that a stroke of engineering genius? Or just the biggest, most expensive way in history to sweep a problem under someone else's rug? I honestly go back and forth. Tell me where you land in the comments. I want to hear the argument. We get curious about the stuff nobody thinks to ask. Subscribe and feed your idle curiosity.